Thank you very much for coming. My name is John Stenberger. I'm President and General Counsel of the Florida Family Policy Council. We're very pleased that you're able to be with us today. The Policy Council is one of 38, soon to be 40, state policy councils around the country. We're associated with Focus on the Family and a group called Citizen Link, which has just changed its name to the Family Policy Alliance. We do very much what Tony Perkins, Family Research Council does FRC on a national level, only we do it here on a state level. So we engage in the legislative process, we engage in registering people to vote, informing voters, and then actually getting out the vote. We stand for about 3 or 4 issues: life, marriage, family, and religious liberty. First of all, life. We believe that the right to life is the sine qua non of all other rights. As my old mentor, Ken Connor here in Tallahassee used to say, the right to privacy means nothing to a corpse. So the right to life is very important. We also believe that marriage and family structures are really what creates a civilization. It is the bedrock for a civilization, and we're seeing now a collapse in these institutions, which are causing tremendous social problems and actually an advancement and a growth of the state as they attempt to take the place of marriage and family structures. And then finally, religious liberty is a very important issue. In fact, this is the reason why the separatist Puritans came to this country and risked their lives on boats, because they could not, in good conscience, worship the way that England wanted them to, the Church of England, and so they came here. So these are the issues we stand for. And we're also happy to provide issues today from the candidates on a variety of different things, including economics and foreign policy, as well as social issues. I call him a mediator. Hopefully he's not going to be a mediator. He's going to be a moderator. There's a difference there. But see, I knew Preston Scott before he was Preston Scott. So we go back, way, way back, and I have a great deal of respect for him. He has agreed to moderate this debate. And without any further ado, please welcome and give a warm Tallahassee welcome to the voice for all that is true, right, and just and beautiful here in the North Florida area, Preston Scott.
All right, real quickly here. I was at a function back in November where I reminded John that I was his pastor when I moved here in 1987, and he looked and he went, "Wow, how about that?" I said, "Boy, I left quite an impression on you, didn't I?" John knows that I have great love and affection for him and his family, and the respect. There's just no end to the work that he has done and what he's accomplished on behalf of all of us for the state of Florida. So, John, thank you very much. Well, welcome to this evening's debate. I have met with each of the candidates on my radio program, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator instead of the inquisitor tonight. Our goal is to give questions and answers to help you determine which candidate is best equipped to serve Florida's 2nd Congressional District, which today is not unlike determining somebody being ready for combat. Here's what you, as the audience, can expect tonight. Each candidate will offer an opening statement. Then each will answer each question by our panelists. The first half of the debate will focus on social and domestic topics, the second half on economic issues and foreign policy. You can expect answers. Candidates have been instructed to answer questions and not deviate by attacking their competitors. Frankly, I expect decorum and answers to remarkably important questions, and I think we deserve that. Candidates will receive a courtesy bell when their time is up. They will be expected to wrap up their thoughts within 5 seconds. If not, you and they. Boy, all of a sudden I feel like I'm on The Price is Right. Can I hear that bell one more time? You have 5 seconds when you hear that bell. If not, you and everybody here will hear my voice saying wrap it up. There will be a short intermission between panels, and at the end you will be given an opportunity to vote in our straw poll tonight. Reminder, if you are working for any of the candidates, you may not, repeat, you may not hand out any material or literature until and only after the straw poll results are announced and guests are leaving the event. There will be 0 exceptions to this, and if you do not adhere to this rule, I will embarrass your campaign on the radio every morning until the primary in August. No, seriously, as a matter of law with regard to a 501c3 which is sponsoring this event, it is vitally important you abide by that. So thank you very much. Let's meet our panelists on the very first panel this evening. Sarah Johnson. Sarah is a millennial conservative leader, a young Republican, and No Casino Central Florida field director, recently named to Florida Politics list of 30 under 30 rising stars, Sarah Johnson. Bill Cotterell. Bill is sort of retired from the Tallahassee Democrat. Are you ever retired from anything, Bill? Bill is a weekly columnist covering Florida government and politics since 1969. I have great respect. Welcome, Bill Cotterell. And our final panelist for panel A tonight is Jerome Hudson, a Breitbart columnist, longtime political analyst, and member of Project 21, the national leadership network of black conservatives. Though he may not place it on his resume, predating all of these things is the fact that he worked as an intern for me on the morning show. Jerome Hudson, ladies and gentlemen. And now it is my honor to introduce you to the candidates. Would you please welcome Dr. Neal Dunn. Business owner Jeff Moran. Attorney Ken Sukhia. And Attorney Mary Thomas. Candidates, when you get to your opening remarks, you may do them from where you're seated, or you can come up here to the lectern for the opening and closing remarks. But let me remind the candidates of a few things. An electronic bell will be heard when your time is expired. You'll get 3 to 5 seconds to conclude your remarks. We have asked you to refrain from mentioning the other candidates because I've seen it on TV and I don't want to do this. Will they mention my name? Will they mention my name? We're going to try and just stick to the issues and get some answers. Is that okay with you folks tonight? All right. Candidates who mention their opponents during the issue portion of the debate will be interrupted and probably thrown out of the room. I'm just kidding. Candidates are permitted to take notes during the debate with the pad that is in front of you. You are allowed to use notes for your opening and closing remarks, and that's it. During the Q&A, they have been instructed to have no notes, and oh, by the way, no cell phone calls, no texts, no, oh, don't forget to say this, that, or the other. If not, you'll get a timeout. Candidates, you are expected to remain seated except during the opening statements, where you can come up here and speak from the podium. And so we'll begin with opening statements. You have 3 minutes, and we'll begin with Dr. Neal Dunn.
Thank you very much. And I also want to say a special thank you to Mr. Stenberger, who made this available, and the Family Policy Council for putting this on. I'd like to take one more minute to introduce my wife. I'm running for this office, this campaign, as a part of a team. Stand up. Leah Dunn. There's 2 of us. So my name is Neal Dunn. I'm a surgeon, I'm a veteran, and I'm a businessman. I'm also a conservative Christian running for Congress because I believe that the country is worth fighting for. I believe that our children and grandchildren are worth fighting for, and I believe their future is at stake. This president has ignored the Constitution, and this Congress has failed to protect the Constitution. And it needs to be protected, all of it, the Second Amendment and also the innocent unborn lives. What qualifies me to be a congressman? I've never held public office. I think that's a good thing. I'll tell you what I have done. I'm a surgeon from Bay County for the last 25 years. Before that, I did 11 years in the Army as a surgeon. I built my practice from 2 doctors to 45 doctors, over 400 employees. I understand how hard it is to make a payroll, balance a budget. I have watched Obamacare over the last 5 years as it grows like a cancer on our healthcare system. It is failing everybody, and at the same time, the costs are spiraling out of control. The next Congress will rewrite the healthcare law, and that is why it is more important than ever to send someone to Congress who understands healthcare, a physician. Our economy is staggering towards collapse under a debt that is inconceivable, and more government debt is not going to make more American jobs. This administration is strangling the economy with regulation and taxes. The only obstacle to growth in this country is bad government policy. the American military is under attack by our own White House. Now, I'm a veteran. My father was a veteran. My wife's family. Every generation has been in the military, from the revolution to Afghanistan. We have a son who's in the military. This White House is openly hostile to the military. We were raised on duty, honor, country. But I am an optimist. I think we can repair America. I believe we can repair the economy, rebuild the military, and repeal Obamacare. And that's why I think 2017 is the year we make America great again. Thank you.
Next, with opening remarks, business owner Jeff Moran. Jeff?
Good evening. It's great to be here. We had a little controversy here before we started about some notes. And my question is, if I need notes up here to tell you who I am today, what am I going to do after the Washington machine beats down on me for a little while? I've said this before. I am who I am. If you like me now, you'll like me when I come home. If you don't like me now, you're going to hate me after I come home, because I'm not going to change. My name is Jeff Moran. I'm a retired law enforcement officer, a small business owner, and I am a constitutional conservative. My wife Bonnie is here with me tonight. I brought some family. It's important to see that you have support of your family, because this really is about serving our country. A good friend of mine told me that we need to look at these things in order of God, family, or God, country, and family. And I never understood that before I started this race. I always thought the order should be God, family, and then country. Or country, then God, family, then country. But I'm telling you what happens here, and as we're pushing out through this, you have to put others ahead of your own interests. And that's what we do. That's what serving is about. We want to go to Washington. We need to send people up there that are truly going to serve. I know what it's like to serve. I've served as a police officer. I've served as a business owner. And I want to be your conservative voice in Washington, D.C. People ask, what's important to you? Well, it's jobs, the economy, national security, but most importantly, getting this country back on track. Back to the principles that our founding fathers laid out for us. The roadmap is there. We just need to send some people to Washington that are not afraid to take on these fights. This is going to be a fight, but I tell you this, you need to send somebody new, not just a new face. You need to attack these problems differently. If we send the same type of people to Washington year after year and expect a different result, we're going to be disappointed. Isn't that the definition of insanity? Our country cannot handle more of the same. I offer a difference here. I will go to Washington. I will serve your interests. And if you have not decided who you're going to vote for on August 30th, ask yourself this question. Which candidate more reflects who I am? Someone that has been through your struggles, gone through your fears, worked hard to get to where they're at, and have done it with their hands, blood, sweat, and really pushed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. With his opening remarks, Attorney Ken Sukhia. Ken?
Thank you. My name is Ken Sukhia. I have my dear wife here and one of my children. The others are out of state and tied up. But something that occurs to me as I look at this race, and that is that what I find is that people who are running in conservative districts like this one tend to run as conservatives. And pretty much everybody will end up saying much of the same things on the various issues. So then the question is, when you're sitting in your seat, why should you support one of us as opposed to one of the other? Because we're all saying pretty much the same things. There'll be some nuanced differences, but for the most part, people are going to say they're conservatives. But isn't that the problem that for years and years, people have been running as conservatives and governing as moderates or liberals. And this is what prompted me to enter the race. And I think we have some fine folks in this race. But I want you to consider some of the factors that I believe distinguish me in this race. And the most important factor is that for all of my life, I have been fighting on the front lines for conservative causes. Now let's take each one going down the line, the key issues that are confronting us. Terrorism. As the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Florida, appointed by H.W. Bush, I put foreign and domestic terrorists behind bars. I fought the narco-terrorists who were invading our shores and the Colombian cartels, and I will do the same in Congress to fight terrorism. Immigration. As the United States Attorney, I put illegal aliens in jail. I enforce the immigration laws because that's what our nation has to do, and I will do that when I go to Congress. Planned Parenthood. We're concerned about it. I fought Planned Parenthood in an 8-day knockdown, drag-out trial defending the Parental Notice of Abortion Act in Florida at the request of Governor Bush. And only 3 weeks ago, I went to Congress to testify about the atrocities of Planned Parenthood in selling fetal body parts when I testified before a congressional panel. What about Obamacare? I fought Obamacare when I was called in to assist the legal team fighting Obamacare in 2009 in the case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, what about government regulation? I've spent the last 24 years of my life devoted principally to defending individuals and corporations fighting excessive government regulation. What about the sanctity of life? I went to Washington on my own dime to fight for the right of life for Terry Schiavo. What about the military? I was counsel to George W. Bush in the 2000 recount battle. I was his federal counsel, and I handled the federal trials for him. One of those trials was the military ballot case, which was indeed one of the most significant cases to be tried in that case, and I was defending the right of the military to have their ballots counted. When it comes to moral issues, I fought them because I went to Washington to fight the Internet Decency Act for our children. Why would I support the principles you support? Because I have fought them all my life. Thank you.
Ken Sukhia. Now welcome Attorney Mary Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Mary Thomas. I'm a Christian, a wife, a mother, and a constitutional conservative. Throughout my life, I've worked hard for everything that I've achieved. Nothing was ever handed to me on a silver platter. You see, that's because I'm not a political insider or part of the establishment. I am living the American dream, and I'm proud to be here today. My parents came to this country legally from India in 1972, and they built a family medical practice from the ground up. In fact, my siblings and I used to help my parents clean the office on the weekends. So I know firsthand the problems that small businesses face and what it takes to build something out of nothing. A few years ago, I got my job working for Governor Scott, not because of who I knew or through political patronage or campaign contributions. I got my job by applying online, and I was hired based upon my merits. These opportunities to achieve the American dream are being threatened because our federal government is attacking our Constitution and our freedoms. I am running for Congress to save the American dream for my son Luke and the next generation. Here's the problem. Professional politicians, lobbyists, and insiders have ruined our country. We need to elect fresh, strong conservatives who have the energy, the passion, and the skill to stand up to the Washington establishment and say no more. No more Common Core. No more deficit spending. And no more over regulation. In Governor Scott's office, I worked to go line by line through agency rules, and we repealed thousands of regulations and put our economy back on the right track. And no more Obamacare. We cannot afford to send a nominee who has not consistently fought against Obamacare. I oppose Obamacare and have always opposed it. And in Congress, I will fight to fully and immediately repeal Obamacare. At 37 years old, I am the only candidate on this stage who has signed the U.S. Term Limits Pledge, because I'm not going to Washington to be a career politician. I am going to Washington to put Congress back in its place, in the hands of we the people. And I know that together we can save the American dream. God bless.
All right. Now it's time to get to the question and answers. Everybody will have an opportunity to answer questions first. It will rotate. I will be determining who answers questions first. The first question will come from Sarah, and Dr. Dunn, you are up first.
The First Amendment Defense Act would prevent the federal government from discriminating against individuals and organizations based upon their religious beliefs or moral convictions that marriage is the union of one man and one woman, or that sexual relations are properly reserved to such a marriage. Specifically, this act would prohibit the federal government from denying or revoking a nonprofit entity's tax-exempt status and from denying or excluding an individual or organization from a federal grant, contract, or employment for expressing or acting on that belief. The First Amendment Defense Act would also work retroactively by requiring the federal government to look back and consider accrediting any school, college, or entity that failed to be accredited because of a religious belief or moral conviction that marriage is the union of one man and one woman, or that sexual relations are properly reserved to such a marriage. If elected to Congress, would you support or oppose the First Amendment Defense Act?
I would completely support that act. I think that it's a travesty that we have to have an act like that that defends the Constitution. The Constitution shouldn't need defending. But yes, it clearly does in today's society, and I support that completely.
Jeff?
That is an excellent piece of legislation. Congressman Labrador wrote that, and Senator Lee is a co-sponsor in that bill. They've actually made some amendments on that bill. Senator Lee has clarified a couple questions. I think it's an excellent piece of legislation. You look at the sponsors, the co-sponsors on this bill. This is what we need to do. When I'm in Washington, I'll be proud to support that legislation.
Ken?
The Constitution, Amendment 1, says that Congress shall pass no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. And the courts have held in a number of cases that a person's civil liberties and a person's conscience must be protected by that constitutional provision. And in 1993, Congress passed a law which was the First Amendment Restoration Act, which in effect said exactly that about all statutes, that if someone has an interest and a desire to exercise their First Amendment freedom to exercise their religion according to their conscience, they may do so. The sad thing about this statute is that there are 60 members who have joined in seeking to pass it, whereas another provision we're going to talk about, which is the LGBT Act, which I understand we're going to be asked about, there were 165 congressmen who have joined to pass that statute. But I wholeheartedly support that provision.
Mary?
As a strong constitutional conservative and a Christian, I support the First Amendment Defense Act because it supports two of our most strongly held constitutional rights, freedom of religion and also freedom of speech. We cannot allow, as Christians and strong conservatives, these constitutional rights to be trampled upon. So I absolutely support the First Amendment Defense Act.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Bill Cotterell, and answering first will be Ken Sukhia.
Mr. Sukhia, our previous congressman from this district, Steve Sutherland, previous Republican congressman, the first vote he cast, I believe, in 2011, he parted with the leadership, defied the speaker, and voted not to raise the debt ceiling, although I believe the decision had been made that it had to be done. I remember him coming back here and saying he just couldn't do it. He wasn't sent up there to do that. Under what conditions, as a member of Congress, would you break with the leadership and perhaps even at your own expense politically? And I think incorporated in this question is what we saw today of the speaker with Donald Trump. Many leaders are openly saying they can't support him. What would be your test of when to go along and get along?
Well, I think the most important aspect of my conscience when it comes to issues is the fact that I came to Christ when I was in 1974, when I was in college, and I have sought and strived to fight for moral causes and causes that are close to the hearts of our conservatives and those who feel as I do. And so I think my record demonstrates that I am perfectly willing to go against the grain and to fight. For example, when I was the United States Attorney, I was called to Washington because I was told that there was something serious that had occurred. And I went to Washington to learn that the Colombian cartel had put a hit out on my life. And it didn't slow us down. We were, in fact, the toughest sentencing district in the country. We were among the most aggressive districts in prosecuting the Colombian cartel, and I would remain so. So if I'm not afraid of them, I'm not going to be afraid of some elitists in Washington.
Mary?
Well, I'm not going up to Washington to make party leadership happy. I'm going to Washington to save the American dream and to represent the people of our district and to protect the Constitution. So if there's something that doesn't protect the Constitution and does not help the people of our district and our country, I will absolutely go against party leadership. And that is something that I've consistently done. Recently, I was just endorsed by the Tea Party Patriots. And one of the reasons that they endorsed me is because they said that I had the courage to stand up and call for the resignation of John Boehner while he was still Speaker. And in Governor Scott's office, I stood up against the Obama administration and the Department of Justice, even when some members of our team wanted to go along, because that was what we needed to get a good result for our state. So I think I have a history of standing up to the establishment to defend our Constitution and the people of our district.
Neal?
Thank you. And let me take the question backwards and start with going against the party leadership. I think it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. So if the right thing isn't party guidelines, that's fine. And I don't need or want anything for Washington except a better future for our children. In terms of the debt ceiling, I think that there's a bill currently in Congress. It hasn't passed the Senate, Full Faith and Credit Act, that removes the brinksmanship from the debt ceiling so that we can actually address the debt without talking about defaulting on the bonds and all those things. So we can remove the brinksmanship and we can address this in a forthright fashion.
Jeff?
If you take away nothing else from this debate with me tonight, you'll see that I look at things differently. I'm a different type of person. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lobbyist. I look at these things completely different. I'm not worried about me pulling away from leadership. I think, why has leadership pulled away from us? It's about time we put some people back in Congress that can take our leadership roles back and we can represent the people here and not going down the lines of leadership. I'm not worried about pulling away from them. I want them to start coming back to where we are.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Jerome, and we'll begin with Neal Dunn.
Testing. In many areas of America, such as in New York, there are more babies aborted than are born. Many millions of Americans do not want their hard-earned tax dollars going to support such a procedure. Just yesterday, Louisiana's Senate committee passed a bill in that state to defund Planned Parenthood. And just a few days ago, Mississippi's governor signed legislation into law to do the same in that state. In March, Governor Rick Scott here in Florida signed a bill to defund Planned Parenthood, making Florida the 12th state in the U.S. to do so. My question to you is, if you were elected to represent North Florida in Congress, would you propose any legislation that would place a ban on all public funds to Planned Parenthood or any medical facility?
Thank you, Jerome. Yes, the short answer is yes. I would support such a bill. I'm pro-life. I have been all my life, not just for the campaign. I'm going to put that in context for you. I'm a surgeon. In my specialty, we actually operate on unborn children, in utero surgery. I've done those operations. There's never been a question in my mind when I'm doing surgery on that child who is yet to be born, whether or not they are a child. And I've seen many of those children born healthy because of the in utero operations that we've done. I'm pro-life.
Jeff?
Simple answer is I'm absolutely pro-life. I've taken a very hard stand on this. It's not always popular, but that doesn't matter. I'm not here for a popularity contest. When we look at Planned Parenthood, we've had some very good people that have gone up there to fight this and try to reverse that. Ken has done an excellent job up there. He feels that in his heart. But again, I tell you, I'm different. I'm not looking at how I'm going to defund Planned Parenthood. We need to go back to Congress and take control of the purse and do the appropriations we're supposed to. We need to turn this around and look at it from another direction. If we do our job in Congress, you need 60 votes in the Senate to fund it. We need to look at these things differently. If you take nothing else away, I'm different. I look at these problems different, and we're going to solve them. Fighting harder the same way isn't going to give you a different result. We have to look at these problems differently.
Ken?
There are 58,568,000 babies who have been aborted since 1973. Each of those children were born in the image of God. Each of them is created in the image of God, and I believe that in our womb, God created us. And I am also aware that Planned Parenthood is responsible for the most abortions in our country. Some 95% of Planned Parenthood's activity is, in fact, abortions. And despite what we saw with the videos last year about Planned Parenthood and the atrocious activities, it turns out, shockingly really, that 150 of the 234 Republican members of Congress voted on December 18, after those videos became known, to fully fund Planned Parenthood to the tune of $285 million, not a penny less than they sought. There's something wrong when those people who all ran, oh, I'm sorry, you just said 30 seconds, so yeah. Oh, yeah, got it. When those people who all ran, they surely ran as conservatives, and they said they would fight it. But what's going on? So I can tell you, no, I will not budge, because I have already fought them. And I did so in part against my interest, because it's impacted me over the years. And
Thank you, Ken.
I just like hearing the bell. It's fun.
I get the feeling Ken's going to hear that bell a lot tonight. Mary?
As the mom of a 2.5-year-old son, as a wife, a mother, and a strong Christian, I believe in immediately defunding Planned Parenthood. We cannot allow taxpayer funds to be used to kill millions of innocent unborn babies, especially when Planned Parenthood is selling baby body parts for blood money. When I saw that Gwen Graham had received over $5,500 in Planned Parenthood funds, I called on to her to return those funds, and she refused. But I saw her at a North Florida parade when I was holding my son Luke on my hip, and I told her that I'm praying for her to return that Planned Parenthood money. Because I've been so vocal about defunding Planned Parenthood and standing up for life, I've been endorsed by the largest pro-life group in the nation, the Susan B. Anthony List. And I've also been endorsed by Concerned Women for America, that endorses men and women who will abide by traditional family values and biblical principles.
Thank you, Mary. Our next question will come from Sarah, and it will be directed first to Jeff. Jeff?
The Equality Act is a bill in Congress to amend the Civil Rights Act to create a new legal protected class based on a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, which would include a person's appearances and mannerisms. Among other things, the bill would require all public accommodations to allow men to use women's showers, locker rooms and bathrooms, and YMCAs, private gyms and fitness facilities, retail stores, women's domestic violence shelters, and medical and health care facilities. It is unclear if this act would apply to public schools, but if enacted, this bill does expressly prohibit any institution or programs from receiving federal funding if they do not comply with these rules and requirements. Finally, this bill also allows the Department of Justice to bring a civil lawsuit in a federal court if someone alleges a violation of these provisions. If elected to Congress, would you support or oppose the Equality Act?
Jeff?
We need to look at what we're really talking about here. Less than 0.3% of people does this affect. Why are we wasting our time doing this? No, I'm not going to support adding additional costs and doing these things. Why don't we pay more attention to the 99.7% of us that are struggling with this economy? $19 trillion in debt. Why does the government keep bringing in these things that are not important to us in our everyday life and start paying attention to the things that really matter? We're going to have to go up there and, again, I keep saying it, I'm a different kind of person. We're going to look at this differently. Forget about these things that are not affecting us. We've got real problems in front of us. Let's focus on those.
Did you answer the question?
Yes, I did.
Okay. You satisfied with that, Sarah?
Will I support legislation?
Would you support the Equality Act?
No.
Okay.
Ken?
I would not support such an act. I think it's asinine. I think it's completely ridiculous that in our country, that if someone wants to wake up identifying as a different sex, and the way the act reads, it not just locker rooms, but dressing rooms as well. It says that if you have a sex stereotype that you want to be like that day, you just simply are that. You identify with that. And that gives you the right to walk into a woman's restroom, and we're the odd ones here. We're the goofballs and the people who are being mistreated, are mistreating them. No, we're the normal ones, and we have a right to protect our children in going into bathrooms and so forth against those men who identify as women.
He answered the question.
Period. So, yes, I would oppose it.
Mary?
All Americans have certain constitutional rights. Our rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religion are protected by the Constitution. And what the Equality Act does is it gives certain individuals the ability to trump the rights of people who have deeply held religious beliefs that marriage is between one man and one woman. Allowing a man to go in a woman's restroom or a woman's locker room is unnatural. It is not what God intended, and it goes against common sense. And we as Christians and strong constitutional conservatives cannot allow freedom of speech and freedom of religion to be trampled upon.
Neal?
I bet you're not going to say yes.
Sarah, the short answer is no. I would not support that legislation, and I think the reasons are abundantly clear. It's a foolish law. It's foolish that the Congress is actually spending time talking about this kind of thing. We're labeling bathroom doors. That's crazy. And we've seen already what's happened in places where they're doing this. It's wrong.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Bill, and answering first will be Mary.
Ms. Thomas, Jerome mentioned earlier the bill that Governor Scott signed defunding Planned Parenthood. That also did several things with regard to operating restrictions with the clinics. I believe that a similar law is before the Supreme Court out of Texas, and the court has enjoined enforcement of a similar statute in Louisiana. Those things, of course, occurred before Justice Scalia died. But if the court rules on these cases during the time that you're in Congress and the issue should come back before Congress, what sort of exceptions would you contemplate if the court allows some discretion in this legislation? What exceptions to permit abortion would you countenance?
Well, I am strongly pro-life, and I do not have any exceptions to abortion. I think there is never an instance when an innocent baby's life should be taken. And when we're dealing with cases such as rape or incest, a horrific crime has been committed against a woman. And the person who committed that crime must be prosecuted to the full extent of the law and punished. But we cannot allow an innocent baby's life to be taken to pay for the crimes of another. And when we're talking about the life of the mother, that is less than 1% of the abortions that are performed every year. And I believe that it is a doctor's duty to protect the lives of the mother and the child. And a doctor should never do anything to intentionally harm the life of an innocent child.
Neal?
Thank you. So I think we all know that rape is a horrific crime, that the women who suffer this crime are special victims, also of incest, same situation, it's rape. I do think that there's room in our laws to recognize some special cases where the mother's life is at stake, truly at stake, and in cases of rape and incest. Otherwise, I see no exceptions. And I agree, it's a very small percentage, 1%. Thank God, it's a small percentage.
Jeff?
I think it's easy to say that we'll all agree on that. I think these are the same points off probably each one of our websites. This is what we agree. I know Ken will say the same thing. He's very passionate about that. But again, we need to look at this differently. What are we going to do? It's one thing to just say that we're not going to allow abortions. What are we going to do for these victims? We need to make sure that we have assistance for some adoptions and what happens to these children after they are born. We need to take care of them after they're born, not just be satisfied that we didn't kill them in the womb. And how are we going to do that? Well, again, I hate to keep going back and repeating these things, but there's so many things we want to do, but if we don't repair our economy and do what we need to do, we can't help these victims. But let's help the victims, and everyone up here is opposed to this without exception. I've stood on that. I will always stand on that.
Ken?
I would say that some of the bills that are identified on some of the websites of the people who are running, who have asserted that they don't believe there should be an exception, those bills include exceptions for rape and incest. I disagree with that. I think we have to be loving and understand that it's a very serious, very deeply difficult situation. But because I believe life begins at conception, I can't in good conscience agree to say that those who are, that the method by which someone conceived is a justification for killing the baby. And so I can't agree with that. I do think if the life of the mother is in jeopardy, that's a legitimate exception, and it has to be clear that that is indeed the case, so that it can't be abused. But if the life of the mother is in question, that's the only reasonable and justifiable, in my mind, exception.
Thank you, Ken. Our final question with this panel will be from Jerome, and we'll begin with Jeff.
Jeff, several constitutional scholars agree that the 14th Amendment does not guarantee citizenship to the children of foreigners, whether legal or illegal, therefore leaving the decision to Congress. Some of those constitutional scholars include former United States Attorney General Ed Meese, as well as non-conservative judges like Richard Posner of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. So my question to you is, if elected to Congress, would you support legislation that would end so-called birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants born in the United States?
Yes. That's that simple. What we also need to look at is, everyone is talking about immigration and passing new laws. I've worked with immigration. I worked down in South Florida to where I actually picked up individuals that were in this country illegally. The law was we picked them up, we brought them into the station, and immigration would come pick them up, take them to Chrome Avenue Detention Center. If they were found to be in this country illegally, they were deported. Well, we have a lot of controversy and a lot of talk about that now. The laws have not significantly changed, but how we carry those laws out has. Now, if you're found to be in this country illegally, they give you a piece of paper and you promise to come back and maybe be deported in a month. So let's not look at just making more laws. What I oppose that? Yes. We don't need more laws. We need to enforce the ones that are on the books right now.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Ken?
Yes, I oppose that as well. You know, this is tilted, so I can't see these folks over here, but
I'm sorry, Ken.
Well,
I know it's challenging for everybody up here to look to your left.
Yes.
You oppose birthright citizenship.
Yes, but let me explain. My father came here in 1939. He was an immigrant from India, and he went through the naturalization process. He ended up serving in World War II, and my cousins, many of my cousins from India, have gone through that process. It takes some 6 to 7 years. And I was so fortunate as the United States Attorney to be able to make the motion on behalf of the citizens who were going through the naturalization proceedings. And it was really a great honor, and it was a wonderful time, those who would be new citizens. But it takes 6 to 7 years. And one of the things I would say in the motion is they have demonstrated a facility with the English language. They have demonstrated the knowledge of our history, the American history. And because of my time there, I developed some sense of what it means to go through the process legally. In that same courtroom, incidentally, I did prosecute those who violated those offenses, and I believe that's what we should be doing.
Thank you, Ken. Mary?
I oppose birthright citizenship. My parents came to this country from India in 1972, and they came here legally. So the issue of illegal immigration is deeply personal to me and my family. In fact, my parents are here today. Mom and Dad, please stand up. They were willing to follow the laws so that their children could have a better life. So when President Obama issues illegal and unconstitutional amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants, it is an outrage to me, to my parents, and to the thousands of immigrants waiting in line to become Americans the legal way. I support legal immigration, and illegal immigration needs to end now. We cannot allow birthright citizenship because it's a magnet drawing illegal immigrants into our country.
Neal?
Thank you, Jerome. Yes, I oppose birthright citizenship, and I would go to say that this administration has actually made a mockery out of our immigration laws. They have invited illegal aliens. They've incentivized them to come. They give them free health care, free education, free cell phones, sanctuary cities to hide in. We need to completely reset that back to follow the laws we have, the laws that used to be enforced. I oppose birthright citizenship.
That ends our first panel of questions. There will be a 9-minute intermission, and then we will come back with our second panel. Candidates, you have a 9-minute break.
9 minutes. 9-minute break.
I'm just going to take a second here as everyone's getting back to their seats and say, candidates, thank you for an adult conversation. Right? That was like I was having nightmares about that when John said, "Would you moderate that?" I'm like, "Oh, please, don't turn this into CNN or Fox or any of those debates, please." But thank you very much. A quick reminder for those of you, anyone social media savvy in the room? Are any of you like hashtagging things tonight? Who's hashtagging? No, seriously, you don't have to be embarrassed. Who's hashtagging? All right. Hashtag CD2 debate. That's what you got to do. You got to do hashtag CD2 debate. I have no idea what any of that means. I was just telling you that's what you're supposed to hashtag, okay? So here we go. Let's meet our panelists for the second panel. First, Christian Cámara, Florida Director, Senior Fellow, and co-founder of R Street Institute, a nonprofit public policy research organization focused on free markets and limited effective government, otherwise known as Reaganista. Ladies and gentlemen, Christian Cámara. Our second panelist is Catherine Baer, chair of the Tea Party Network, coalition of over 80 Tea Party and 912 and conservative organizations in Florida. Catherine Baer. Catherine? And Sal Nuzzo, Vice President of Policy with the James Madison Institute. Sal.
Thank you.
And so, of course, we welcome back our candidates, Dr. Neal Dunn, Jeff Moran, Attorney Ken Sukhia, Attorney Mary Thomas. Second round of questioning will begin with Sal, and a question for which will begin with Ken.
Candidates, two trending Twitter topics recently have been hashtag raise the wage and hashtag fight for 15. Both efforts aimed at raising the federal minimum wage from its current level of $7.25 to $15 an hour. In addition, California and New York have recently enacted legislation to do that in their own states. This is in spite of the fact that the nonpartisan CBO has estimated that it will cost the economy about 500,000 jobs, mostly at the lower end of the wage spectrum. With that in hand, the question to you all is this. What is your stance on increasing the federal minimum wage at any level, and what specifically would you do to follow through on your opinion?
I oppose the concept of the government intervening with minimum wage. I think it's similar to Nixon's price control thing when the government gets involved. I mean, I feel as Milton Friedman and Hayek felt that the government need not be trying to determine and pick winners and losers in this regard and make such interventions into the private market. And there are examples. For instance, Seattle has recently increased the minimum wage to $15. And in the first 3 months of that change, it has had the highest loss of jobs in the history of Seattle. 11,700 jobs lost in 3 months in Seattle. And people forget that when we were teenagers, we could get jobs and were happy to work. In fact, I worked for $1 an hour at the veterinarian. And it was a great experience because I knew I wouldn't be there forever and that I would be using that as an opportunity to advance to something else. So I oppose such wages.
Mary?
I do not support raising the federal minimum wage. I think we have seen in states that have enacted higher minimum wages that it's harming businesses, employers, and employees. People are losing their jobs, hours are being cut, and they're even being replaced by machines. I think we need to let the free market do its work without government intervention, and I absolutely do not support raising the federal minimum wage.
Neal?
So the truth is that the average income for Americans has gone down under this administration, not up. And raising the minimum wage hurts the very people that it purports to help by blocking their access to jobs. You get job loss, as was referenced. Minimum wage jobs should be viewed as a pathway to better jobs. And by removing that stepping stone on the pathway, we make it harder for people to join the economy as full productive people. I oppose it.
Jeff?
Let's do a poll in here. How many of us have ever worked for minimum wage? How many of us are still doing it? It's not supposed to be a living wage. Okay? Why do we keep focusing on these things that don't matter? What do you do to get out of minimum wage? You come to work early, you go to school, you do something else. I also realize I'm the only one up here without titles in front of their names, but these are the guys that I rub elbows with, not the other guys, okay? This is not supposed to be a living wage. You're supposed to take some personal responsibility and make yourself better. It's not the government's job to make you better or give you a wage. That's your responsibility. Why don't we start looking at taking our responsibility for our own actions? You know, we hear all this other stuff, white lives matter, black lives matter, blue lives matter. You know what matters? Actions matter. It's about time we start looking at it that way.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next question will come from Catherine and be directed first to Neal. Neal?
In 1994, Congress imposed a 10-year ban on 180 types of semi-automatic firearms it termed assault weapons, and 10-plus round magazines, which primarily affected handguns designed for self-defense. These so-called assault weapons are identical to other semi-automatic one-shot per trigger pull firearms, which weren't banned. Congress's subsequent study of the ban showed that contrary to ban supporters' claims, these guns and magazines had never been used in more than 1% to 2% of all violent crimes. Since the ban expired in 2004, the number of these firearms owned have risen to all-time highs, and violent crimes have fallen to a 42-year low. The law was allowed to sunset in 2004, but is being considered again by Congress. If elected, would you oppose any law banning any type of semi-automatic firearm or limiting magazine capacity? And are there any restrictions you would consider supporting if elected?
So the short answer to your question is I would not support any ban or renewal of ban or restriction on the firearms. And let me put that in some context. In my house, hanging over our living room wall, is a musket that was picked up by my wife's great-grandfather, who was serving under George Washington at the Battle of Yorktown. He brought that musket away from that battle. It was surrendered by Cornwallis's troops, and it hangs on the wall in our living room as a reminder of the importance of free men bearing arms to protect themselves from tyrants. The Second Amendment is safe in my house and in my hands.
Jeff?
Let's get back to the bottom of this again. The Second Amendment. I've read it. I hope most of you in here have read it. I didn't see anything in there about rabbit hunting. I didn't see anything about squirrels and shotguns and what this is for. The amendment is what it is. Let's stop dancing around this and just follow the Constitution. It's in there. It's pretty simple. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I'm a lifetime member of the NRA and these things that people do that just sounds good. But I tell you what, there's not an NRA member in here that wouldn't be proud to see what I have in my safes at home, okay? So it's not about joining an organization. It's about following the Constitution.
Ken?
I agree with both Jeff and Neal. You know, one of the first, it's no secret that one of the first things, or it's no surprise, that one of the first things that an oppressive government will do is confiscate the weapons of its citizens. And our founders knew that. In fact, George Washington said that a free and independent people ought not only to be armed, but ought to have sufficient arms and ammunition to defend themselves against those who would seek to deprive them of that independence, including their own government. And they knew that, and they put it... There's a reason they put that in our Constitution, and I would staunchly defend that right, because it's in there.
Mary?
As a constitutional conservative and a proud card-carrying member of the NRA, I do not support any restrictions upon our Second Amendment rights. In fact, I went on ABC News after President Obama issued his latest unconstitutional executive order, and I talked about the president's continued overreach and abuse of his executive authority that is subverting the will of our elected representatives. We must always stand firm and protect our constitutional and God-given rights, and I do not support any restrictions.
Before we leave the topic, Catherine would like to redirect.
I asked, are there any restrictions you would consider supporting? I got one answer on that one.
Where do you want to begin?
Mr. Dunn, please.
So the answer to that question is no. I'd be no restrictions, and actually I'd like to liberalize the laws a little bit. Consider suppressors, things like that.
Okay.
Mr. Moran?
No.
Mr. Sukhia?
No, and when I was, let me point this out. When I was United States Attorney, we enforced the laws that are already on the books that are sufficient to deal with the real problem of the guns. That is, those who use firearms during the commission of a felony and or others who are violating the law. 80,000 people have gone in to purchase weapons when they have been convicted of a felony or are mentally incapacitated. That's a crime, and it's a felony. But how many prosecutions has this administration done? 41 of those 80,000. Enforce the laws on the books. That'll put a stop to it. Enforce the laws that are there.
Candidates, thank you very much. Our next question will come from Christian, and we'll begin with Ken.
All righty, candidates, before I get into my question, just by a show of hands, how many of you have signed Grover Norquist's Taxpayer Protection Pledge or intend to sign it? Very good. Well, there's an ongoing effort in Washington that would allow states to impose an internet sales tax. While this is not necessarily voting for a tax increase directly, it would confer that authority to the states for them to do so. The bill's called the Marketplace Fairness Act, and that would grant states like New York or California new tax powers that they could impose on Florida-based businesses simply because they sell online to their residents. Such businesses would have to calculate, collect, and remit those sales taxes to the states where the goods were purchased. Additionally, it would subject Florida business owners to audits by outside states where they have no physical presence or political say. So if elected to Congress, would you support or oppose such a measure? And if you oppose it, what would your alternative proposal be, since brick and mortar retailers justifiably claim that online retailers have the upper hand against them?
Ken?
Yeah, I would oppose that legislation. You know, our son lives in New York City, and he pays $300 a month in taxes just to live, i.e. his real estate rental tax. He pays a $100 tax just for the city. He pays enormous taxes to the state, and to be giving that state authority to collect more of their illegitimate tax revenues from Florida residents would be outrageous. I would oppose that. I know that the chamber takes the position that everyone should be made to basically determine themselves how much they owe and to pay, and that those states can come after them if they don't. I don't approve of that. I feel like the internet is one of the few areas where we have a high degree of freedom, and that people are going to have to just live with that fact, and therefore I oppose it.
Mary?
I absolutely oppose this. I'm not in favor of any new taxes or new fees. I think we can all say that the federal government takes enough of our money and spends it in wasteful ways. We need to let the free market do its work without government intervention and allow companies to compete on their own. I absolutely oppose that additional tax.
Neal?
So I too oppose that tax, and I think the reasons have been well enunciated. But I want to remind us that what our problem is not revenue. We have plenty of revenue. Our problem is spending. We're spending too. The government is spending too much. We don't need another tax.
Jeff?
I'm glad to hear that the other three oppose that as well. I do. I'm the only one that lives that. I'm the only one that collects these things. I'm the only one that sits down with the state for these income taxes, state taxes. I live this every day. I know what it's like to have these people from the government come in and go through your books with a fine-tooth comb, and their goal is to find something. They're not going to leave until they find something. Doesn't matter how good you do, how hard you work. And you know what they found when they audited my books? I had a returning veteran from Afghanistan that owned one of my cars. He needed some parts. I shipped him parts, and I didn't charge him. You know, my only penalty on that audit is because I was penalized and charged interest on what I should have charged that individual because they told me that it was not my right to give a returning veteran free product. So I live this.
I'd like to give you my card.
You got to buy a car first, Ken.
And so it begins. You know, I wasn't going to say anything, but before we started, I heard Jeff offer Ken some of his time on the podium, and now we have Ken offering a card. I'm just saying it starts. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much, candidates. Our next question will come from Sal, and we'll begin with Mary.
Candidates, the Federal Register, which lists out every existing federal regulations, currently over 81,000 pages. Over the past several years, we've seen unprecedented expansion of rulemaking by the executive branch. Mary alluded to that earlier, which many would argue runs completely counter to the U.S. Constitution, several amendments contained in the Bill of Rights, and the separation of powers set out by our founders. Examples include the EPA with Waters of the U.S., Clean Power Plan, immigration enforcement, and net neutrality. Now, my guess is each of you would be opposed to that, so I'm going to ask this question a little bit differently. What specific policy or legislation would you pursue, sponsor, or champion that would both restore the checks and balances to our system of governance and reduce regulatory burdens facing businesses and individuals?
Well, I have a very simple solution to that problem. It's called the United States Constitution. There are too many federal government agencies that are not delineated in the Constitution, and we need to return power back to the state and local governments where it belongs. And in Governor Scott's office, I worked on cutting regulations, and that helped get our Florida economy back on the right track. And that is the same thing that I will do in Washington. But as a strong constitutional conservative, we cannot allow these agencies that are not specifically delineated in the Constitution to remain in existence.
Thank you, Mary. Neal?
So in recent years, we've seen Congress get lazy, and they're not writing the laws in a way that they retain control over the regulatory all the regulations that are promoted from their laws. We need to have much tighter control of that, and we need to bring the agencies back every year, or at the very least every 2 years, for their budget. So we have to approve their budget. If they don't get approved, they don't get to spend the money. And unfortunately, a federal agency is the closest thing you can come to being immortal. So we need to change that, and we can do it simply by writing better laws. This is Congress's getting lazy.
Jeff?
I'm hearing a lot of restating the problem, and I'm not hearing solutions. There's a solution out there. It's called the REINS Act. And they also have the Article 1 project. These are the things that are in our control and we can do. There's legislation that has been dropped in the Senate that will put some of these regulatory agencies back in check. They basically say that if you spend more than a certain amount of money, those agencies must come back to Congress for approval for their money. Let's do that. Let's focus on the things that we can really do. When we do these debates and everybody stands up here and they say, what agency are you going to eliminate? And they list these. You know what? I hate to say it, but have you ever seen a federal agency eliminated in our lifetime? All right? Let's do what we can do. Let's do something real. Let's not talk about this. Let's put this legislation, let's bring this forward and take control of our country again.
Ken?
Over the years, I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation with a client. And it's basically, what country are we living in? Is this America? Isn't this the kind of thing we would expect to be happening in the Soviet Union, in a socialist government, in a communist nation? And what happens is the legislature will pass a statute, and the statute might be 5 paragraphs. And then the administrative agency, which is not the legislature that passed it, the administrative agency, which is under the executive, ends up writing a tome, just a huge, massive set of regulations that govern this. And they become basically the all-powerful bureaucrats that control our lives. And so I think Neal and Jeff are exactly right. Those statutes that are there that require the executive. Thank you. I'll stop.
All right. Next question will come from Catherine, and we'll begin with Jeff.
There are 3 federal laws, the General Education Provisions Act, the Department of Education Organization Act, and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, as amended by the No Child Left Behind Act, which precludes federal involvement in education. And then we have the 10th Amendment, which delegates all power to the state and the people except those that are specifically enumerated in the Constitution. Do you believe the federal government should have a role in the education of our children, and how would you affect legislation in that regard?
The federal government does not belong in education. It's just that simple. The more we get away from the student to the teacher scenario, the worse this is. So I think everybody will agree on that too. But why are we here? Look, the No Child Left Behind, with the race to the top, Common Core. What's happening here is every time we go after the same problem, we give it a new name, the Congress gives it more money. It's about time we stop that. And the only way we're going to stop that is send people up there that are not in the club. Okay, why does this keep going? It's because you got the same people going up there doing the same thing, fighting the battles the same way. I won't do that.
Ken?
We homeschooled our children. I fought on the state level. I fought to defend the constitutionality of the school choice and school voucher programs in Florida. I feel very strongly that this is an issue that ought to be decided by our local communities and our state to train our children as we deem appropriate according to our consciences, and that the federal government ought not to be intervening and intruding in that, in our method of teaching and in what we are teaching. So I oppose this, but I think my efforts over the years reflect that I should oppose it and would oppose it, because I have already fought on those levels to provide for school choice and freedom in that regard.
Ken, Mary?
As the mom of a 2.5-year-old son, no one has more at stake with regard to the issue of education than parents. And we need to get rid of the Department of Education and put education where it belongs, in the hands of parents and teachers. And we need to repeal Common Core once and for all. Common Core harms teachers, it harms parents, and it harms students. It is an unconstitutional grab of our education system. It interferes with privacy. It does not allow teachers to make their own decisions, and it doesn't allow parents to have any input into their children's education. Let's get the federal government out of the business of education once and for all.
Neal?
Well, Jeff, I think we finally found an agency we can get rid of. The Department of Education really doesn't have any constitutional basis for existence at the federal level, and I honestly believe that if we can get a Republican in the White House, we can get rid of the Department of Education and Common Core. It's unconstitutional.
Satisfied with the answer? You're not satisfied, are you, Catherine?
No.
Restate.
How would you affect legislation in the regard of getting the federal government out of education? You can't just go and get rid of the Department of Education. That would be nice.
I think you can. I believe you absolutely can. They were created out of laws and money that that our Congress promoted for them. They can stop doing it. $0 to them. Zero. Absolutely. I think we can get rid of it. We built it. Why can't we get rid of it?
Jeff?
Again, that's good. That gets applause. I wish we could do it, but I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you and tell you that I'm going to go to Washington and get rid of a federal agency. Do you want to be lied to? I mean, we may do this with good intentions, but let's be realistic. Let's do the things that we can do. We can do it through these statutes and what we're putting forward, and we can defund these things and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. December 2015, we already passed legislation that gave the responsibility back to the states, but the funding keeps coming down. We need to look at these problems differently. We can't do the same thing over and over and expect a different result.
Ken?
What was your question again? The second part of that?
What legislation would you enact to affect the change in our education problems?
Well, I would have to, I don't know, to be honest. I guess I would just have to get there and give it my solid attention and determine, what steps could be taken realistically to deal with the problem. I think funding is a major part of it, and that if you pull the funding, there's not much else that they can do. But I'm not sure I have an answer for that at this moment.
Mary?
So.
Well, Congress has the power of the purse, and we need to defund the Department of Education. And we need people who are going to go up there, not to nibble around the edges, but to fight and bring about wholesale conservative reform. We have too many people up there right now who are nibbling around the edges and not fighting for our constitutional rights. That's what I intend to do in Congress.
Thank you, Mary. We need to move on to our final question here, and it will come from Christian, and we'll start with Mary.
Okay, so this is a question on federal subsidies that directly affects the district. In 1982, President Reagan enacted the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, or COBRA. This law restricts federal subsidies such as beach renourishment infrastructure and federal flood insurance in mainly undeveloped, high-risk coastal wetland units designated under the act. Now, despite these prohibitions, landowners can go ahead and develop their land to their heart content, but they are not eligible for these kinds of federal subsidies. And the result is that COBRA has worked. It is a market-based environmental protection program that does not infringe on private property rights, impose regulations, or cost taxpayer money. In fact, it has saved taxpayers billions of dollars since it was enacted. So why does this matter to CD22 or CD2? One of the few COBRA units in the country that has been developed is Cape San Blas. And despite knowing that they would not qualify for federal beach renourishment funds or other subsidies, many landowners there chose to develop this area. Now, due to pressure from residents there and other local officials, former Congressman Boyd and Sutherland both filed legislation to take Cape San Blas out of this program, which would allow then for federal subsidies to come in, and then we, the taxpayers, have to subsidize that. So if elected, would you file or support similar legislation to remove Cape San Blas or any other area like that out of the system, thereby allowing federal subsidies, i.e. us, to subsidize beach renourishment and federal flood insurance, et cetera?
Mary?
Well, I think what we need to do is always get back to the free market without government intervention. And I don't support subsidies because subsidies are the federal government picking winners and losers. Again, we need to let the free market do its work. Let the market determine and competition determine what the rates are. So I know a lot of people may be dependent on these subsidies, and we need to look at how we can get back to the free market solutions. So I do not support federal subsidies.
Neal?
I agree. I am against federal subsidies in almost every case. Knee-jerk reflex. There are a few exceptions. This is not one of them. Insurance is a business where you're spreading risk, and it should be spread across the pool, and it can be done in an actuarial sound fashion by letting the insurance companies price the risk and put the bills out there and have the insurance companies compete with each other in the free market.
Jeff?
Again, I look at things a little differently, unless I didn't hear you correctly. I heard you say that a subsidy didn't cost the taxpayer any money. I don't know how that works. How does the federal government subsidize a program when it doesn't pull money? It doesn't have its own money. That's our money. Did I misunderstand that question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I could clarify. What this law does is that it restricts, it outlaws federal subsidies in these high-risk, low-lying coastal areas. So if you own land there in one of these units, you can build it, but you cannot get subsidized flood insurance from the federal government. The federal government is not going to come in and renourish your beach. If a hurricane comes and wipes away the road, the federal government is not going to rebuild that road. That is up to you because you decided to buy your beachfront mansion there. So the question is, would you, if elected, support taking units out of the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, thereby allowing this federal subsidy of these high-risk areas?
Right. It comes back to, thank you for that, because I think I missed your question a little bit. But it comes back to personal responsibility. You know, it's not just with these coastal subsidies. You take this back to the Farm Bill. We need to get these subsidies out. Free market works. I live the free market. You know, I can only charge a certain amount for what I build and what I put out there. And if I don't do my job right, I'm out of business. When did that change? Why is it that the federal government has to get in there and do those? So absolutely, I do not want to subsidize people. I don't want to subsidize other people's risk. When I do a business, that risk is all on me, and I don't think the government should bail me out.
Okay.
I got the buzzer that time, Ken.
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with what previously has been said about this. But I feel that when the government gets involved, and a perfect example is the stimulus money. You had $800 billion that is sitting out there, and one of our founders said that absolute power presupposes its abuse. And when you have a president who has all these buddies and he has all these people that he owes favors to, those are the ones that end up getting the money. And the government ends up picking winners and losers, and the winners they pick end up being losers, and we end up being the real losers because they don't pick the right people, right entities, the solar energy and so forth. So this, I think, is a fundamental issue about how we feel about our country and our economy and what in the world has happened to our country. This isn't the U.S. and the America that we grew up in. It's become a country of government regulation and control and subsidies and payments to everybody so that the average person is... Thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you, candidates. Panelists, thank you very much.
I could go on.
We know.
We know.
This is going to be a different part of the debate this evening, candidate cross-examination. Each candidate will now have an opportunity to ask one other candidate one question. Candidates, you have 30 seconds to ask your question. Candidates, you have 1 minute to respond. We'll begin with Mary Thomas.
Well, this question is directed towards Ken and actually all of the people up here on the stage.
You can pick one.
Ken, I believe that there are too many career politicians in Washington, and they are causing many of the problems that we have up there. And that's why I signed the U.S. term limits pledge, restricting myself, if elected, to 3 terms in Congress. I'd like to ask Ken, would you be willing to sign that pledge here tonight?
I've already decided to sign the pledge, yes. I'm already planning to sign the pledge, so I just haven't signed it yet. But,
We've got a copy, actually, here tonight.
you don't need to do that. I knew that was coming. But, I think I might be naturally turned out, because, I may not make it that long. But I do, I think it's sensible to sign that, and I plan to. So.
Next question belongs to Ken Sukhia.
I want to ask Dr. Dunn. Dr. Dunn, I've had a little pain in my abdomen, and I wondered.
It'll be over in about 15 minutes.
Wondered if it's something.
Clock's running, Ken.
Wondered if it's something I should be concerned about.
Absolutely.
No, I'm just kidding.
You know I'm a urologist, right?
I'm just kidding.
Clock's running, Ken.
My question is.
I'm getting a little uncomfortable between these two.
My question is for Mary. Mary, I've heard you say that you are the true constitutional conservative in the race on several occasions. And I just wonder what it is about my record, having defended the constitutionality of the school voucher program, having defended the constitutionality of the Parental Notice of Abortion Act in Florida, and having defended the constitutionality of the Lobbyist Disclosure Act, that would make me something less than a true conservative, constitutional conservative.
Mary, you have 1 minute.
Well, I believe, frankly, whatever politicians and people have been doing to stop the problems that we have and to defend our Constitution, it hasn't been working. And that's why we need fresh, new, strong conservatives who will stand up for our constitutional rights at all costs and who are running to save the American dream for the next generation.
Well, I'm fresh, and I'm saving to the American.
Okay,
I'm running
Ken,
to
thank you. We're not doing rebuttals.
save the American.
Jeff, your turn to ask a question of one candidate. 30 seconds.
I think everybody can tell that I'm the outsider here. I'm the one that has not been rubbing elbows inside politics and doing these things. And everybody wants to say that they're the outsider. My question for Mary is, you say that you're running as an outsider, yet your career has been in government, and your husband is your campaign manager who runs your campaign, and that's how this is being funded. How do you consider yourself to be the outsider when you really have not worked outside of government?
First of all, what you're saying is actually, in fact, not true. I've spent several years in private practice, and like you, I was in public service. I served the people of our state and our country, and I helped get good results for our state. And let's not attack other people's families out here. And you're giving incorrect facts. My husband is not my campaign manager. In fact, my campaign manager is here tonight. His name is Matt Joyner. Thank you.
And our final question will be from Neal Dunn. 30 seconds.
Thank you, Preston. I want to turn our attention to a topic that really hasn't come up tonight, and I'm going to direct this to Jeff. I am a veteran. Veterans issues are very close to my heart. I know you have some background in veterans issues, problems that have happened. I wonder if you'd care to elaborate a little bit on that.
I don't know what problems you're talking
I was
about.
thinking you had a nephew or a family member who...
Yes. My nephew, who I raised like a son, did a couple tours over there in Iraq, and that's why these issues are very near and dear to me. And that's why I will make sure that we properly fund and take care of our veterans that do serve us. And we'll have to make sure that when we're up there in Washington, we do not use these young men and women that are putting their lives on the line like pawns in a chess game. They are not pawns in a chess game. They are our sons and our daughters, and we must stand and defend them.
Thank you.
We have now come to closing statements, and we will begin those the way we began the night. We'll begin with Neal Dunn. 1 minute.
Thank you. Our parents left us a great country, and we should not leave our children with a nation that is far less free and far less safe, or an economy that's collapsing, or a healthcare system that's failing. These three areas, healthcare, national security, and the economy, are the areas that I've worked in professionally all of my life with some success. And at the end of the day, if the candidate who knows the most about these problems and is best capable to change the outcome of those problems wins the election, then I think America wins. As a young Army officer, I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is the same oath an incoming congressman takes when he assumes office. I would be honored and privileged to take that oath again to ensure a better future for our children. Thank you very much. God bless America.
Jeff?
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The people up here on the stage with me, they are good people. We do have some differing views, but they will not bring a different view to Washington. We've sent enough attorneys and lobbyists and individuals to Washington, D.C. that have not fixed the problem. We know what has happened up there. We need to send somebody that's different, that attacks problems differently. If you want a different result, you got to send a different person. I'm that different person. I appreciate your support, and I will tell you that you will see me in Washington, and I will not blend in. I am who I am, and you're not going to change me, and I will be proud to represent your voice in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Jeff.
You
Ken?
can have the rest of my time, Ken.
Ken?
We all know that America is in trouble. It's sort of teetering on the edge of political, social, and economic collapse. Washington is a mess, and we really have a lot of work to do to fix it. If you were hiring someone to send up to do that job, wouldn't you want to know what their resume is, just like you're hiring anybody to go up to do a job? What has the person done that would qualify that person, that would convince you that he's capable and he's passionate about fighting these issues? I fought terrorism, I fought illegal immigration, I fought Planned Parenthood, I fought Obamacare, I fought government regulations, I defended the military, I defended the rights of the unborn. I've testified in Congress on 5 occasions, most recently against Planned Parenthood and their effort to sell body parts. I fought against the breakdown of our moral fabric by helping to pass the Internet Decency Act. I prosecuted hardcore pornographers, was identified as one of the top 3 U.S. attorneys in the country in doing so. With all respect, none of the other candidates have been tested and proven in the same way. One more word. It has been said that where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proved. My life has been spent fighting on the front lines for conservative causes. I hope you will join me in fighting for us in Congress.
Thank you, Ken. Mary Thomas?
When I traveled throughout the 2nd District, the fear and anxiety is real. People are wondering where their next job will come from, or will they even have a job? Will the president take away our guns and our freedoms? And will ISIS hurt our troops, many of whom are our friends, our children, and our neighbors? The big difference in this race is this. I'm not running for Congress because I want a fancy political title. I am running so that my son Luke does not have to live in a world that is less prosperous, less free, and less secure than when I was his age. You and I know that the way to change things is to stand up to the way things are, to challenge the status quo. No more lobbyists and insiders who speak out of both sides of their mouths. We can build a wall to keep out terrorists and illegal immigrants. And we can repeal Obamacare. We can do it tomorrow. My friends, together we can save the American dream. And I hope to have your help and support to do this. God bless you, and God bless our great country. Thank you.
How about a nice hand for all 4 of our candidates tonight? I'd like you to please welcome back the President of the Florida Family Policy Council, the presenter of this evening's debate, John Stemberger. John? And at this time, we are going to dismiss all of the candidates and panelists. Thank you very much.